This is a bad situation, but Jewelry Bonnie still has yet to use her ultimate ability, and that would result in the most powerful character to have ever existed in One Piece. I'm not joking, mostly because I'm not very funny. Not only could Bonnie use her abilities to age Luffy up into his final form, but she could also potentially use her powers to restore her father. And also a big thing I missed, in chapter 1095, we were introduced to 6 mysterious treasure chests, and we already know what's in at least half of them. It's one of those details that you really overlook reading the chapter, but then rereading it, you spot it and it's like, ah. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Max. I met Max the other day in the Sydney CBD, very nice guy, helped me dress myself, don't ask. And it turns out he has one of my shirts, specifically the Bears shirt, which you can get at storeglr.com. It's the one I'm wearing right now, actually, which I didn't plan. That was very fortunate. But now it's back to fictional pirate business. In chapter 1064, Eiichiro Oda dropped a very exciting nugget into our ever so nourishing story meal, because in order to avoid being targeted by the Kumakop, Bonnie disguised the Straw Hats by aging them either up or down. Jinbei, for example, was aged down to his child form, which ended up being a nice piece of foreshadowing for the revelation of Seraphim Jinbei, and perhaps a bit of a missed opportunity to see 2 child Jinbeis fighting. That's how they would do it. And Luffy was turned into an old man, but there's something very curious about him in particular, which is that Luffy was given a reintroduction. 1064 chapters into the series, Eiichiro Oda has chosen now to reintroduce our main character. Curious, but this isn't too uncommon. This does happen from time to time, but only with Luffy. Generally in the post-time skip era, whenever Luffy undergoes a significant change, Oda then finds an opportunity to reintroduce him. After the events of Whole Cake Island, with Luffy crossing the Billionberry threshold, Oda felt the need to reintroduce Luffy in chapter 910, right before he got to Wano. And then right after he left Wano in 1058, Oda gave Luffy another reintroduction, noting his now globally recognized status as an Emperor of the Sea. Although this is played for a gag, it's sort of a direct contrast to Kaido's Emperor introduction, where he was given a full page and a big epic narrator speech, and now Luffy, after having beaten Kaido, has his Emperor introduction in a tiny panel locked in a cage and being berated by Nami. The point is that Oda pays very careful attention to Luffy's status in the story. Because yes, other characters do get reintroductions, but they're mostly out of necessity. Because we could go literally years, maybe even a decade without seeing some characters. There are still some characters that we haven't seen post-time skip at all. But as a bit of an example, in the same chapter as this alternate Luffy, we have the reintroduction of Charlotte Pudding. But that's because the last time we saw her was in 2018. So think about it this way. Someone could have started and nearly finished high school in the time that Charlotte Pudding was absent from One Piece. So the reintroduction is warranted. Because the readers need that reminder, but they need that much less so with Luffy. When it comes to our captain, these moments are used as a status marker, and Oda doesn't do that with any other character. So the fact that Luffy gets reintroduced here is Oda highlighting something very, very important. Something about Luffy has changed, and we know what that thing is. Because this isn't just some random old man. And if you're in really deep with the SBS lore, you will immediately recognize that this is the bad timeline Luffy. Oda's alternate One Piece universe, where somewhere along their journey, the Straw Hats fail, and each and every one of them have their dreams destroyed, then going on to split up and live in mediocrity for the rest of their lives. If you want to know what happened in the bad timeline, I have a whole video discussing those events and what happened to the Straw Hats. It's quite depressingly fascinating, but the important thing for this video is that even Oda recognizes this by adding to Luffy's introduction that this is an alternate future Luffy, meaning that Bonnie has actually used her distorted future technique on him. This is a good sign for us, by the way, because it confirms that our One Piece does not in fact exist in the Dark Universe, so there's a bit of hope for us. And I have to point that out because when the chapter came out, a lot of people jumped to a bit of a conclusion stating that Oda has confirmed that Luffy won't ever achieve his dream because Bonnie aged him up and it was the bad Luffy, so this is the bad universe. But those statements are purely a skill issue. They came from people who either cannot or will not read. Elder Chopper is probably also a distorted future version because his old man reindeer form doesn't match either the good or bad timeline elderly versions of him that we've seen. So, this is not a theory. I don't necessarily think that this will happen. It's just a hope and desire that I'm putting out there into the world. But given that Bonnie made a child Jinbei and then we went on to see a child Jinbei, I would very much love to see another older version of Luffy make an appearance. Because Bonnie's distorted future can work both ways. In this case, she summoned Luffy's bad timeline outcome, but what if she changed Luffy's body into his good timeline adult form? Again, if you're balls deep into the SBS lore, then you will know exactly what I'm talking about, but just in case you are a regular enjoyer of fictional pirates, along with the bad timeline, Oda also created a good timeline, a very good timeline, where all of the Straw Hats achieve their dreams, and we essentially see them all live happily ever after. I also have a whole video on that timeline, but what you're looking at right here is Pirate King Luffy, the man who eventually acquires wealth, fame, power, and most importantly, freedom. Although most importantly for this discussion, power. Again, I know I already said it, but we're moving back one step. This is the single most powerful Luffy known in the One Piece multiverse. And yes, there is a One Piece multiverse. Yes, it existed before everyone got sick of the word. And definitely, yes, I've also got a video about it because this is genuinely all I do 7 days a week. In any case, this Luffy has a very particular handsomeness about him that I would describe as Garpsome, because he very much takes after his grandfather. And combining Garp's raw power with Luffy's willpower and mythical Zoan shenaniganry should give you a good idea of just how insanely strong he would be. Bonnie should do this. We're in a situation where even current Luffy doesn't seem like he's quite enough to handle both Kizaru and an old man, and given that Bonnie probably can't use her abilities to debuff either Saturn or Kizaru, why not use them to assist a more friendly face, a more friendly sun god shaped face that her father idolized? Because what we'd be seeing is a Roger-esque Luffy. Only for a brief time, of course, because Bonnie's powers do have time limits on living beings, and the way I picture it happening would be very much like how Nightmare Luffy came into existence on Thriller Bark. Luffy powered up, he was invincible for a couple of minutes, dealt an arse ton of damage, but then reverts to his regular and very tired state, and so the Straw Hats have to pull something out of their assorted butts to clench victory and or safe escape, much more likely the latter. And another reason to do this would be because it's just fun, and that is usually Oda's main driving force, particularly when drawing fight scenes. To whip out the situational Luffy forms, and Nightmare Luffy is far from the only one. In a more comical sense, we also have Water Luffy and Tank Man. But here's the thing we really need to keep in mind. Bonnie is not always quite in control of her powers. In fact, the age manipulation we saw in 1064 was the result of an emotionally unstable Bonnie unleashing her abilities. And for all intents and purposes, what happened to the crew was a random effect, which could lead to a lot more fun for us. Say Luffy has to get up again, fight Saturn and or Kizaru, but Bonnie being surrounded by many Kumas or Kumai keeps getting all teary, and her emotions dictate Luffy's manipulation. In one moment he could be our peak Pirate King Hero Man, and then in another his form could be distorted to something more like Damara Black. And so you end up with these two competing layers of wackiness. Luffy's Gear 5th Toon powers and Bonnie's uncontrollable manipulation of his body. And it just sounds like a fun thing to do. Although here's another fun thought. If Bonnie can't find a better version of Luffy to create, then that would mean that we're already in the best possible timeline. So even if this is the best we've got to offer, that would be a very hopeful thing to know. But one of my biggest questions about Bonnie's abilities during this arc is the hypothetical of what would happen if she used them on Kuma. Because there is a clear distinction between what happens when she uses her powers on living things versus objects, which is the big discussion about Kuma right now. Is he still alive in any way? Or are his remains just an object now? As mentioned before, any effects with living beings are temporary, but with objects, Bonnie's abilities seem much more permanent, which was seen when she destroyed the lock on the door containing Kuma's bubble memories. And upon reuniting with her father's shell, Bonnie isn't exactly going to be in a logical state of mind. I definitely would not be surprised if she tried to de-age him with her abilities in a feeble attempt to restore him. However, during this process, Bonnie discovers that, due to the way her powers are functioning, Kuma is now considered an object and is therefore no longer a living being. Or it could be the other way around. Her abilities confirm that yes, there is still life within Bartholomew Kuma, however, there's also a problem with that. Because with living things, Bonnie's fruit powers only affect the physical state. The mentality of the target is left entirely intact. The mentality of Kuma right now being just a little bit non-existent, so Bonnie could restore her father's body temporarily anyway, but tragically it would still be just as much of a shell as the current cyborg body. Unless Kuma parted with his memories for a reason, and at least part of that reason was the result of an experiment suggested by Stella. So we've gone over this in a couple couple of chapter reviews before, but I think it is much more important now than ever, and one of the most fascinating parts of Egghead Island in general. This short flashback of Stella proposing the existence of the human soul, as well as his desire to want to quantify this via memories. Stella's argument being that memories are signals emitted by neurons. It's a lot of complicated and very sketchy fictional science, but TLDR, if you had someone's complete library of memories, could you say insert that into a body and create life? Like downloading someone's data onto a new device. Or perhaps in Kuma's case, re-downloading his memories into his body and thus restoring his life. So Kuma might not be alive within his own body, which is why the Revolutionary Army failed to get anywhere with him. They had Lindbergh attempting to repair Kuma, and Lindbergh is an inventor. He's good at gadgets and assorted mechanical stuff, but it very much misses the point of what Kuma was lacking. The Kuma he was trying to find does not exist in this body, but may still be alive via this bubble. There's even a very sneaky juxtaposition did when Bonnie discovers Kuma's memories. Stella warned Bonnie not to touch them because it was pain, but Bonnie knew this was a lie. And then we cut to Kuma at the red line, and specifically to a Marine yelling, "He's still alive," which then cuts to Bonnie saying, "This is my father's memory, isn't it?" And this might just be me overthinking pirate comics on the internet, but to me, this is a three-part statement which says, here's a bubble. It's Kuma's memories, therefore, Kuma is still alive. Because when does a man die? When he is forgotten. Although in this case, it's said man's memories, so I guess it's when does a man die? When his bubble memories, which are kept in a secure science-brained facility, are lost or otherwise corrupt in a scientific accident. Although I am fully prepared to accept that this is just the English teacher meme in action, because it's break week and therefore we are well into over-analysis mode. But speaking of, there's also something pretty massive that I did not notice in chapter 1095. I feel like most other people did. Not me though, I am special. But in the Kuma flashback during the announcement of the God Valley Slaughter Games, surrounding Saint Ass Clown are 6 pillars holding 6 chests, which all assumedly contain 6 very special items. Items that are perhaps to be used as prizes for whoever does well in the hunt. Now this sounds pretty underwhelming until you realize that we've seen these chests before. Very interestingly, these chests have the exact same design as the one containing Luffy's Devil Fruit in the very first chapter of the series. And it's not impossible to think that Luffy's Devil Fruit could be one of these prizes if the world nobles failed to recognize it as the Nika fruit. Not all devil fruits have readily available images, and if you don't know what the fruit itself looks like, then it's just another mystery ability. And I can guarantee you that we know what is in one of these chests, or I guess more accurately, what will be in one of these chests. Because I would bet some pretty excessive units of currency that Shanks is going to end up in one of these chests, which Roger will then go on to plunder during the God Valley incident, which we know from Film Red and Volume 4 Billion when Oda drew a sketch of the Roger Pirates opening their prize to discover a child, which a fan then rendered as a full image and another fan colored said image. Although a really much more sinister idea is that baby Shanks is already in the chest, because I guess the reasonable assumption would be that he was placed there for safekeeping. Garling and or family of Garling saw all of the chaos that was happening, and so they had no choice but to put their baby in a chest for safekeeping. But also remembering that the world nobles consistently find new ways to be absolutely despicable, and with that in mind, maybe baby Shanks is a prize to be won, an offering from the Figurland family to become a slave or servant to whoever wins him. That sort of thing would not surprise me at all. But other than that, we might know what 3 of the other items are, because there are currently 3 characters associated with the God Valley incident who have yet to eat their devil fruits. The first is obviously Bartholomew Kuma himself. The Nikyu Nikyu no Mi is a disgustingly powerful fruit and well worthy of being put up as a prize in this hunt. In addition to that, Emporio Ivankov's devil fruit, the Horuhoru no Mi, could also be within one of these treasure boxes. But most importantly, I would like to throw Kaido into this discussion, because it is confirmed that he ate his devil fruit on the day of the God Valley incident. In chapter 999, Big Mom says, "On the day rocks fell into ruin at God Valley, I gave you that legendary model of the fish fruit. You owe me for life, Kaido." So the idea would be that amongst all of the chaoses, Big Mom manages to acquire one of these prize chests which contains Kaido's future fruit. And because she genuinely cares for him and thinks of Kaido as a younger brother, she gives it to him. And one unknown we have is Figurland Garling. When he was introduced, there was a bit of controversy regarding the translation of his title. Some people chose hero, others chose champion, and Viz chose to make it much more vague by stating that he was the man who distinguished himself at God Valley. But if the champion translation is more accurate, then it could imply that Garling won one of these chests through the hunt, and it could contain whatever devil fruit ability he may have, which I think tracks. Garling does well in the hunt, he's good at killing killing people, so he wins the prize. The prize is fruit. Garling eats fruit, and all that he has left now is an empty chest. But then, oh no, pirate attack! Quick, stuff my son into the empty chest that we have. Good thing we have that. Plonk son over there whilst I, Garling, do the fighting. Son disappears. That shouldn't have happened. That wasn't part of the plan. And the rest is history. That or someone else ate or stole the devil fruit that Garling was supposed to win. Maybe Garling was supposed to eat Kaido's devil fruit, for example. But for such a small, really minuscule detail of the chapter, these chests could be absolutely massive, because we can already directly connect them to both Luffy and Shanks. Luffy's fruit is found in a chest that looks exactly like these, and Shanks was similarly found in a chest. And in retrospect, it's kind of funny because Shanks, who was found in a chest, then goes on to find Luffy's devil fruit in the exact same model of chest that he himself was found in. But even if we include Luffy's fruit and say an unknown Garling fruit, then that's still only 5 chests filled. So you let me know in the comments, what do you think is in the 6th mysterious prize chest?